Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Armory Show and to our Armory Live programming. It's my pleasure to introduce the second talk of the day, In Conversation, Art and Luxury. In this conversation, ArtNet News Editor-in-Chief Andrew Goldstein speaks with fashion designer and creative director Sander Lack about the crossover of two industries that share more than just values. Both Andrew and Sander's full biography can be found on the Armory Live section of our website, so I do encourage you to look there for more information. There will be some brief time at the end for some questions, but until then, please join me in welcoming both Andrew and Sander to the stage.
Hello. Is this thing on? I don't think on. Hello. Testing the mic.
Hello. Oh.
Hello. Here we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Goldstein. I'm the editor-in-chief of ArtNet News and host of the Art Angle podcast. And I am delighted to welcome you here today for the official first live recording of the Art Angle right here in New York's Armory Show Art Fair.
Yay!
Thank you very much. So you're probably looking at this screen over here and thinking to yourself, wow, art and luxury, that is a very broad topic. Well, spoiler alert, we're actually going to drill down into something a little bit more narrowly defined, and that's personally more exciting to me, which is how art and fashion are intersecting today, how that's changing, and what that means when it comes to the idea of innovation. So we're very lucky because you couldn't ask for a better interlocutor on this subject than Sander Lack, the visionary creative director behind Sis Marjan, which is this white-hot fashion label that he founded in 2014. 2016. Okay. Well, you were recruited in 2014 to start it in the first.
Moved to New York in 15 and then started 16.
So Sander has an incredible fashion line, but he's also collaborating right now in a very fascinating and I think unprecedented collaboration with the architect Rem Koolhaas's Guggenheim show, Countryside: The Future. So we're going to get into what that means a little bit in a moment, but first a little bit more about Sander, a Dutch designer who was born in Brunei and raised between Malaysia and Scotland. Sander spent his early career taking on increasingly prominent roles at Philip Lim, Balmain, and Dries Van Noten before being tapped in 2014 to start his own label, which he's named Sis Marjan after his mother and father's first names. Since then, his clothes, which are defined by ravishing jewel-colored tones, cutting-edge materials, and billowing non-binary cuts have been a critical and commercial hit, winning him the 2018 CFDA Award for Best New Designer and raves in the fashion press. As seems de rigueur these days, Sander has collaborated with artists like Tina Barney and Walter Robinson, but his new project with Rem Koolhaas and the Guggenheim is his most ambitious yet. So, full disclosure, I've actually known Sander for years, and we've had many conversations about this topic, but never in a formal setting like this where I could throw some real hardball questions at him. So I think
I'm really getting a little bit scared right now.
Well, thank you for being brave enough to come on the Art Angle today, Sander. You collect art. Your mom is a painter. You have collaborated with artists, and I believe you met your boyfriend at the Met Gala. So how does art and the world of art kind of fit into your life?
Well, I always kind of consider fashion sort of the industry that really takes from everywhere else because of the pace that we have to create things. So fashion from a professional point of view is something I can tap into quite easily for my work. When it comes to personally, I've always, wanted to be a painter, or I've always wanted to be an artist, but very quickly realized that that is not what I am good at. That's not something that actually I should be doing. But I like, looking at it. I like seeing it, experiencing it. I like working with it, but I'm not actually an artist. What I do is much more applied, and I like the restrictions of the industry that I'm in and the boxes that I need to work within. But art is always a big part of everything I do.
You went to Central St. Martin's in London, which is a very famous art school, and you studied fashion there. Did you ever study art? Did you ever try your hand at studio art, drawing, painting?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was younger, before I discovered fashion, really, I was always drawing, and I was always fascinated by this idea of creating something on paper, creating something on a canvas. But again, I quickly, because I'm very critical and I'm very Dutch when it comes to really direct in, like, okay, I know exactly what is working and what isn't working. And I saw very quickly, I am not an artist, but I like to express myself in an artistic kind of vehicle, but it was not art. I was not good enough.
So right now you're expressing yourself through a new fashion collection that you did in collaboration with Rem Koolhaas and the Guggenheim, which is a kind of a hybridized, very interesting, innovative way of creating a fashion line. So how did that collaboration come about?
I mean, that really started about like a year and a half ago when somehow through people we were put in touch with each other, and we decided to sponsor, part sponsor the exhibition. So there is a, there was immediately sort of like this plan ahead, because a year and a half ago I knew that something was going to happen. I knew that we were sponsoring this exhibition, and I knew that we were, I had access to Rem and his team, and I knew that I was going to be able to do something with it. Just to sort of give you a context of how things normally work in the fashion industry, you do about a gazillion collections a year, and every week you basically sort of finalize something, and every month you have another collection coming out, and so you're really working from deadline to deadline and from collection to collection, and there's never really that much time to think or to, the reaction you have as to what you just finished. Then when you go on to the next one, that's kind of like how you work. So this was really interesting, because all of a sudden I knew a year and a half ago that this thing was going to come up. And that was really where it kind of started. So I had literally, 6 months to just think about what I wanted to do with this, and then 6 months to research and communicate with him and figure out how to translate what he was doing into what I am doing. And that was kind of like the beginning part, yeah.
So this is a very high concept exhibition. I don't know if everybody knows what Countryside the Future is about, but it's really about how Rem Koolhaas has realized that the countryside is this entirely forgotten dimension of contemporary life, where everybody is thinking about the cities. Cities occupy about 2% of the surface area of the Earth, but they contain about 70% of the population, or that by 2025, they're going to contain 70% of the population. The countryside is seen as what he calls the back house for urban civilization. How do you take something that is exploring this very big, important topic and channel that into a fashion collection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was really the challenge, and I would have never, and Rem knows this because it's the first thing I told him, I would have never picked this subject myself. If I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to work on a collection, I would never say, yes, let me do it about the countryside and how 70% of the people live in the city. And that's just not a fashion subject in that sense. But that's also why I thought it was really interesting, because it is a subject that is so wide, and it's very hard to speak about certain things. Yeah, you have some images of the exhibition for those who haven't seen it. What initially my kind of interest was also beyond the subject matter. It was also the fact that this architect and his agency, his OMA, AMO, were doing this 8-year research project in a way in the Guggenheim. So for me, it was a very interesting. When I went to Rotterdam and I met with Rem for the first time, and he showed me sort of what the exhibition was going to be. I kept thinking about where's the angle that I can take, like what is there from really obvious things like is there a texture, is there a color that I can use, is there a shape, but then I kind of sort of started forgetting that and was thinking more about the idea of research, of this vast amount of time to really dive into a subject, no matter what the subject is. The fact that somebody is able to do that and somebody is able to then put that in a renowned museum as the Guggenheim gave this kind of new twist to how I was thinking about how I work and how I do things. And I never have any time. So I all of a sudden realized I need to use this time to do almost the same, like sort of pretend that I'm doing a research project and the end result is not an exhibition in the Guggenheim, but it's a fashion collection. So it kind of made me rethink about how I create something.
And did you and Rem kind of have an interchange, a creative dialogue while you were creating?
Yeah,
the
a
show?
lot. Like we talked a lot about, we're very known for our colors that we use, and it was very interesting because Rem, the first thing that he noticed really, that he wanted to talk about was color, and it was interesting because when we talked about color, it was so much about the similarity in a way of how the idea and the application of color is there, because when he talks about color in his world and his field as an architect, he thinks about it within the context of space and in the context of you enter a space. How do you feel? What is what is it? Is it an entrance? Is it calming? Is it stressing? Is it all of these kind of things? Whereas I, of course, talk about color that goes on your body. So I'm talking about skin colors and body shapes, and so there are these differences, but also clear similarities between what we do. And when I went to his studio, for example, there were a lot of materials on tables where he would have a piece of a stone next to a piece of metal, next to a piece of plastic that he was putting together to probably put in a building or think about what would look nice together. And for me, it's exactly the same. When you come to my studio, it's like a piece of fabric next to a zipper, next to a button, and those are the ingredients I play with. So we did talk a lot about that. Also a lot about, more pressing matters, obviously, and like the sort of urgent matters that come with this exhibition, and the things that are happening in my industry, and all of that kind of stuff as well. It was, it was a real kind of dream come true to be able to just sit in a room with him. Yeah.
What were some of these bigger kind of existential issues that you guys were talking about that interrelate between architecture and fashion?
I think we talked more about the differences there as well. I think it was more about the pace that fashion is in and the pace that he works in, which was really interesting. That when he works on a project, it can take it can take 10 years, it can take 15 years, it can take a very, very long time. And we were talking about sort of the difference between how he has so much time that he can also start, him and his team start questioning things. And you get to this point where it's like, Jesus, it's been fucking 8 years. Do we still have to, where for me it's the other way around, where I'm like, oh my God, I have 1 week to do a whole thing, and I have no time to even really reconsider things. I just have to go. So we were talking about sort of the spiral of that, and there were certain things said that I should definitely not say in public. Yeah.
So, how did you approach this show? What were some of the ideas and entry points that you decided to use to tackle this big idea?
Well, the first thing we always do when we start with making a collection, we start with the color card. So the color card is first, and then you do fabrics, and then you go into design, and so that's the normal kind of route that I take. So what I did here was the same a little bit. So I started with a color card based on all the information, all the visuals that I had, and start building a color card, from all of the kind of research that they did, from the research that I did, and from there on out start working with textiles, thinking about what the angle was, thinking about does it need to be something that is purely about sustainability, which initially was immediately my first reaction, but it was very clear that the exhibition isn't directly about sustainability, it's really about countryside, and so it's about a much wider subject than this little part, which is obviously a huge subject, but that's not the main goal of the exhibition. So I also didn't want that to be the main goal of the collection, but I did want to make sure that we were conscious of it, because it is a sensitive subject, and fashion is definitely not an industry that is always right when it comes to these things. So I wanted to make sure that there was elements in that, but I also wanted to make sure that I tried to make something that was inspiring and was not not going into sort of the doom scenario of like, it's the end of the world and we're all going to live like The Road, that book. It's not like that. I really wanted it to be about the beauty of it and what people can make and what people can do and how nature can be used to create fabrics and colors and all of those kind of things.
One thing I thought was very interesting about how you approached it is that you really, you could have gone to nature and decided, okay, I'm going to do some bark rubbings or something like that, or
Yeah.
or somehow kind of like
We tried.
But what you did instead is that you took a very high-tech approach to it, where here what we have on the slide is an ensemble that you created with scientists and technicians at Cornell University.
Yes.
And can you tell me about the process that was used to make this?
So on the runway look, on the model, you see the dress, which is created at Cornell. They have a department that really specializes in all of the things related to natural dyeing and fibers, and what they do is incredible and really important. The issue, it's not the issue, but the reality of the game is that, where we are right now, a lot of these techniques are not necessarily realistic when it comes to the production cycle of things. But they are, really great ways to creatively play and to try things out. So this is one of the techniques that is called contact dyeing, which is fabrics are prepared to basically take whatever you put on top of them, absorb the color and the fibers of the plants and flowers that you put on top by pressing and hammering it into the fabric. So it's as you can see sort of on the image, these are actual remains of plants and of natural things that are stamped into the fabric. And that's a process that is, very exhausting and it takes a lot of time. Of course, the reality is that afterwards, the idea, if you want to commercialize it, is not as ABC as going to Cornell and doing 500 meters of it. Like, it's just not possible with the timelines that we are. So that we made a digital version of it that we then put on a recycled ground to sort of like give you that feeling, and also to be able to communicate the message without it being pure couture, because really that's what these things are. Like, some of these things are so advanced and they take so much human skills and time that it isn't really ready to wear anymore. It becomes couture.
I mean, or in the art context, you would have the original art object versus the additioning of the art object.
Exactly.
So another one that you have, another approach that you took, is that you worked with a very interesting
Yes.
sheep and wool artist.
Yes, Claudie Jongstra is her name. She's Dutch. I'm Dutch as well. Rem is Dutch as well. So but there was sort of like a little bit of a Dutch theme going on in the collection as well. So Claudie Jongstra is an artist who felts and boils and washes and creates these blankets that are they're not, she doesn't make fabrics, even though what they are fabrics. They are art in the sense that it's hand done. It's there's no practicality to them really. Like, it's purely a visual kind of vehicle. But you can make beautiful garments out of them, and that's kind of what we did. So we worked with Maharam here in New York, who works with Claudie Jongstra a lot, and they donated a blanket. She donated a blanket to us, and we made a garment, and we did some pillows with it as well that are for sale on First Dibs.
Now, one of your colleagues told me that she doesn't actually shear her sheep, that the wool falls off of these sheep naturally, and she just gathers it
Exactly,
from the ground.
yeah.
How does that even work?
I mean, that is just a long, timely process. She has a lot of sheep, and she literally just waits till the hairs fall off, and then she collects them, and then over time she has enough to do something. And when I was telling my production manager, who was at some point considering maybe we can do something, and I told her the story, and then she freaked out, and she was like, "There's no way!" And so it's also something that it isn't made really to be produced in the way that fashion is produced, but it is something that really can show sort of the beauty of some of these processes. And
so here's another artist that you worked with, is the artist Diana Shearer, who specializes in manipulating plant roots into these intricate patterns. So how does that work? How did you work with her?
So she is also working for a university in Nijmegen in Holland as well, and she's German, and she has been working on trying to figure out how to make or grow fabrics. That's really sort of her underlying kind of like, a thing that she does, but she does it really with a very artistic point of view. So she is making it, growing it. So basically what you do is you grow like how do you call it, like a sheet of grass, let's say, and you grow it, and in 3 weeks it grows enough so that the roots are strong enough. The roots are, the top layer of the soil and the grass is chopped off, and the roots is basically like a film that's left over. The reality of this is that it isn't ready. It isn't at the stage yet where it is actually a fabric. It really is just dried roots that is really like thin and really fragile. She is working on trying to somehow, like biologically like manipulate it so that it is possible to actually have it be something you can wash and you can bring to the dry cleaner, and that could be sort of a substitute for fabric at some point. It is not there yet, but we wanted to sort of play with it, and really, as you can see here, what we did is we fused it on top of a cashmere, and it was really an incredible look. It falls apart over time, so it's really again a couture piece. But again, it's also about being able to come here and being able to have been spoken to the press a lot and speaking about this, this technique is really the reason why we did it.
So we've been talking about an architect, a root artist, a fallen wool artist. This is obviously very hybridized terrain. So let's pull things apart a little bit. What is the difference between fashion and art? Is fashion art?
I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think everyone will have their own. It's the same. I think if you ask the question, what is art, is the first, and then from there on out is fashion art. So I can only give you my personal opinion. I would not say that what I'm saying is, true for everyone. I've always said no. I've always said that fashion is not art. There are overlaps. There are definitely, areas where things become, are touching the subject of art. I think the limitations and the boundaries and the frames you have to work within in fashion are so limiting that it doesn't require you to be as free as I think you should be when creating art. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that you're always working with a body and the limitations of what people put on their skin, and in the same way that I don't think a painting is necessarily art. It is if it's just made for a living room to go above a couch. Like if that's the goal of making a painting, then for me that is not art either.
What is it then? Is that design? Decor?
Then it's design, yeah. Mm-hmm. And also the thing there is like what people are confusing with that conversation as well is that I don't think art is higher than any of the other things. Like it's just apples and oranges. It's like they're all fruits. You have art, you have fashion, you have architecture, you have design. Like for me, they're all equal. Like I don't see art as a higher form per se.
I think back to the ancient Greek term for art is techne, which actually which just means skill, very high and refined skill, and just as you're talking about working with the wool artist and the root artist on making these exquisite but impractical pieces of clothing that you can't even use as clothing, that kind of seems to shade into a definition of art as being something that is non-functional, impractical.
Yeah. It's rubbing against it, but I would never say that this code is art for that reason. No, it's playing with it, and fashion plays and rubs and makes love to everything because we have to use everything. We're tapping. That's also what I always love about fashion is because it's just like shamelessly sleeping around with every other art form or every other applied anything because we just have to produce so much stuff. So therefore, I think it isn't art.
So you're not the only
like a parasite.
You're not the only designer sleeping around with art right now. If you look at the fashion world, you have the LVMH prize-winning designer Tebe Magugu, who right now has accompanied their Fashion Week show in Paris with an exhibition of artwork at the Palais de Tokyo. You've got artists you've got designers like Virgil Abloh and Tom Brown making art. You've got artists like Sterling Ruby making fashion. The designer Duro Oluo just curated a show at the MCA Chicago. Chanel just hired the former CEO of the Serpentine Galleries to be their new global head of art and culture. There seems to be a tremendous amount of activity that is really pulling these fields together in a way that has happened in the past, but arguably not to this kind of degree. And I wonder, why do you think that these fields are coming together so in such proliferation right now?
Because we need each other. Because there is no art fair without fashion week, and there's no fashion week without an art fair, and we're all tapping into each other. When I am looking at a customer profile, and that sounds really like a horrible, term, but when you look at things like, okay, who is your customer and where do you go, where is she going, where's he going, what kind of gallery, what kind of art does he or she buy, it's all tapping into the same thing. And for gallerists it's the same, what is she wearing? Comme des Garçons? Okay, she must be highbrow. Is she wearing Margiela? Or what is the brand? What are the shoes? It's all tapping into the same kind of thing. And I think especially now, these are not the easiest times, and I think we need to all rely on each other in a certain way, and sometimes that happens really beautifully, and sometimes it happens, almost in a rape kind of way. It really just depends on how, but sometimes it's really nasty and not how it should be. But it is all connected, and there's a big economical component to this as well. There's a huge a money machine behind both of these industries that need to benefit from each other to survive even, I think.
I always wonder, do you think that the fact that art collectors have a lot of money and are disposed to spend their money on these cultural products that are some people might see as not entirely necessary to going about your day-to-day life, do you think that the fashion world sees the art world and thinks, okay, this is a clientele that I want to approach by kind of nodding to the art stuff? Is there a way that it's a form of marketing?
Oh, absolutely, and in a way, it also makes total sense, because if you think about, where people spend their money and how people spend their money, whether you are a gallerist or a designer, it is kind of the same thing. You need to obviously stand behind all your original ideas and your creativity and the artists you represent or the clothes that you make. But in the end, we are running a business, in fashion's case, and in the case of gallerists as well. I'm not talking about the artists, even though obviously they also need to make money, but. I think it is very clear that if somebody spends, $3 million on an artwork, then most likely that person wouldn't really flinch at a $3,000 dress, Mm-hmm. So I think that sounds really not very romantic and very business, but that is kind of what we're doing as well.
Well, the business side is fascinating, and it makes me wonder, do you have collectors in the same regard who buy a lot of your work routinely from season to season? Are these big collectors the ones who amount for a large part of your business, or does a large part of your business come from individual buyers who walk into a store, who see it online, and buy it, as a normal person would for
we are a small company still, we have a distribution of 150 stores that we sell to, not our own stores, but that we sell to around the world. And, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we have a lot of people who are also still discovering us, and, there's a lot of markets that are new markets for us. But what we are seeing is that, the art world is definitely a world that, is very good to us. There's a lot of people who really are working in the artwork world or are artists. There's a lot of artists that wear our stuff as well. And, so that is on one point, yes, a great business, from a business point of view, that's great. But also from a personal point of view, that's really great because, there's a lot of people out there that can buy your stuff, and if it is people that you really admire or represent something that you like, then that's great. Obviously, I'm not going to reject anyone who isn't necessarily that but wants to buy something. But you want to, the best case scenario is that you love and like everyone who buys your things.
So, what do you think fashion can learn from the art market? Is there anything that you are actively kind of absorbing from what you see in something like an art fair like the Armory Show? Are there any cues that you're getting, any kind of tips or strategies?
I think maybe a few years ago I would say something related to time, but I feel like the art world is going in the same kind of time spiral that we have been going in fashion. So I don't know if I can really say that again. I feel like there's another art fair every week. I'm sorry, I probably should not say that here. But there's a lot of urgency happening in the art world that I used to really be. When I think again, when you're looking at the art world from a business point of view, it's different from when I look at artists. When I look at artists, there's a lot of things that I feel fashion can learn. Is the fact that artists are in general kept to their own schedule and kept to their own way of working. And if somebody does something in 2 hours or in 2 months or in 2 years, that kind of is up to them to decide. And that's something fashion could learn a lot from. But when it comes to the business of art and the business of fashion, I feel like they're becoming quite similar.
And what do you think that art can learn from fashion? I mean, fashion, I think, obviously precedes art in a lot of ways in that it went online before art did. It has a global mass audience in a way that art can only dream of. It has a much bigger penetration into the popular consciousness at large. And merchandising in the fashion world is so sophisticated and so far leaps and bounds beyond what the art world has developed or is capable of doing. What are some things that you think the art world can learn from fashion?
I probably should not say this, but I don't think art should learn anything from fashion. I think art should be more itself. I think art should actually not look at fashion. Fashion should definitely look at art. Fashion should look at everything, and again, just sleep around with whatever and whoever. But I think art should really be much more snobby and its own thing. I think it shouldn't be. This shouldn't be Fashion Week. This should be something that is, really related to what this industry is. So I think maybe art should close its eyes to fashion a little bit more. And I'm saying this and I'm shooting myself in the foot because obviously I'm also tapping into it. So yeah, maybe edit this out later.
No, I mean, but the interesting, you've brought this up a few times that you feel the cycle of the fashion industry is oppressive in some ways. Is there, and now that you've tasted this year-long kind of timeline with working on the Guggenheim show, is there a way that you can actually incorporate that more sustainably into your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I've really sat with my team after the finishing this collection, and I really talked about how freeing it was and how liberating it was, and obviously, there's no way that from the 8 collections we do a year that every collection can be as grand in a way as this one. But I do think that there are certain things that I can do to maybe make decisions earlier, or really stick to an idea way before, instead of really sort of lingering on and waiting for that last moment to kind of really go into the next thing. So I'm really shifting the calendar, which is the only person that is really hard for is me, because I just have to really think of something, stick to that idea for 6 months, and then, which I'm training myself to do. And I think that's the only way forward, because I was getting really tired. Also because, Six Marjan is this part of my career, but I've worked for a lot of people before, and I've been in the industry for a long time. So I've been in that rat race for a while, and I really felt, before the Rem Koolhaas collaboration, I really felt I was getting just a little bit exhausted of, and not exhausted of tired, I need to sleep, but exhausted of creatively, of just always having to up myself. And when I do something, 3 months later, it has to be better than before. It has to sell more, and it has to look better, and it has to get better reviews, and if you win an award once, you have to win it again the next year. I was just getting a little bit like, ugh, is this what this is about? And this kind of really gave me a new, like a new kind of energy in a way.
So what do you make of these multi-hyphenate fashion designers like Virgil Abloh, who have been broadening their scope from fashion and music into furniture, art, museum shows? What do you make of him as a phenomenon?
That's a very tricky question. I think it's a really incredible thing that he is able to do that. I think when you do that many things, certain things suffer. I would not be able to do that, and I applaud him for trying and doing it. But I think at some point where you do too many things, something's got to give, and I would love to be able to do that. I just feel like when I put my energy in something, I really put everything in that one thing. And when I work on a collection, it's like a real love relationship with this new thing that I'm working on, and it's so intense. And it would be very hard for me to then dabble a little bit in here and there. But that said, there are 4 collections that you do at the same time, and there's a collaboration here, and there's this there, and then so there is already like a lot of multitasking you have to do. But I think it's great that people are expanding that. I think it's a real millennial luxury. I think the millennial generation is really the generation to have spent their childhood like 1 week horse riding, and then 1 week playing football, and then being really into dolphins, and then really loving drawing all of a sudden. Like, it's very that generation of like, I like everything. I wasn't like that. I liked 5 things, and that's all I liked.
Although, for the record, I think that you could be categorized as a millennial.
I am a millennial, so maybe I'm just sort of trying to go against it.
And then what do you think about the other side of the equation, where you have artists like Sterling Ruby making fashion lines and collaborating with Raf Simons, but now kind of going out on his own to have his own fashion line?
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's a more unusual road, and therefore I think that's a really great thing to happen. And I'm really curious to see how that goes. Like what I'm really curious to see what the business model is behind that, and how, if that's going to be as, fashion related within the calendar as we all have to do, or if this is something that is more like a project that has a certain amount of time, but it's really fascinating. I think everyone is really on their own right now, like there used to be really clearly like, you have to do this, this, and this, and only then you can, you have to please this person, and you have to go to that thing, and then only then you can do this. And, fashion was very much about rules and about the relationships you had, and you had to follow them. And now it's like everyone for themselves, and everyone is, so there are a lot of people who are really using that to their advantage. And these are people who do that, like they just really play by their own rules. And I applaud that. I think that's great.
I mean, at the same time as people are playing by their own rules, there are a lot of trends that are very visible. I mean, just as in, if you walk through the art fair, you're going to see a lot of things like neo-mannerism. You're going to see things like neo-surrealism. There are very visible trends that you can see in painting particularly. What do you see in fashion that are the interesting trends that you've been paying attention to?
I mean, that's the tricky thing. I don't know. In a way, and I don't consider myself an artist at all, but that's kind of like asking an artist about what the trends are in art. I don't really pay attention to that. Like, it's not... I would like to think the trends happen from the work that I do and not following trends that then I apply. But the only trends that I do follow up close is more like culturally, like what's happening, from like a business point of view of like spending patterns, and what people are listening to, what people are watching, like all of that stuff. Like, fashion is really a sponge of culture in that sense. But when it comes to trends within fashion, I actually would not know. No, I have no idea.
Well, I think one that is that the art world is very interested in is the boom in interest for sneakers and for athleisure. I think there was a lot of attention that was paid last year when Sotheby's did a sale of sneakers that sold for over $1 million. And it seems
What was that? What sneaker was that?
well, it was actually 100 sneakers.
Oh, okay.
So I think that 99 of them sold for $850,000,
Oh, wow.
and then one of them sold for over $400,000. So there's a lot of interest in this because it seems that the art world is identifying these sneaker buyers as potential art collectors, as a pool of, as a new addressable audience, because this is a young audience. It's a young global kind of buying population demographic. How do you explain this kind of craze, for sneakers, the rise of athleisure? How do you see that from a fashion perspective, and how do you understand that in a kind of a cultural perspective?
Well, I mean, also going back to what you were saying about the art world, being aware of tapping into future customers, that's exactly the same as what I was talking about earlier, just the other way around. It's like fashion tapping into people who are buying art. So I think that is a very interesting thing that is happening, vice versa. Wait, what was your question? The sneakers. I think the trends that I can talk about, are things that have happened in the past, and I think there has been obviously a surgence of streetwear and everything related to what also can be called daywear, or there's all of these terms that people use, but there is sort of like a normalization of fashion, and that has happened now for 5-6 years, and sneakers are sort of the perfect kind of like holy grail of that, the idea of designer sneakers is relatively new. Sneakers were sneakers, and that was it. And then fashion saw an opportunity, like they always do, and tapped into it. And I think that's kind of where it heightened it, because then you start having the fashion sneaker and the real sneaker and the real sneaker, and then the history of it, and the worth is of like where it comes from and how old it is, and then Hermes does a sneaker that is $2,000 and blah, blah, blah. So it's like this, an upping game that really happens. And people thought it was a bubble. I don't think it's a bubble. I think it's just a reality of what's happening now.
So on that note, I want to open things up to the audience. But beforehand, I want to say thank you, Sander, for being on this experimental first live recording of The Art Angle. And I want to give a shout out to my producers who are in the audience,
Yes.
Tim Schneider, Caroline Goldstein, and our editor, Nick Long. If you are interested in learning more about The Art Angle, you can subscribe to it on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And I also recommend that you go and try to track down a copy of the ArtNet Intelligence Report to plug another product that we are
Oh, but if you're
plugging.
plugging product, I can plug product too.
And now for the second part.
Six Marjan has done a collaboration with Rem Koolhaas, and we have a product that is in. Here you go. We have it on the picture. So this is what we have as a program that we did for the gift shop in the Guggenheim and on our website and on Essence. Sweatshirt, T-shirts, collaborated with Rem's team related to the exhibition in the Guggenheim.
So are there any questions in the audience?
Hi, I'm Yaling, a reporter from Jing Daily. I have a question. I'm sure this is on everyone's mind, coronavirus. How has it impacted the fashion and art industry? And for you, Sander, how since it originated in China, has it impacted anything from supply chain to, I don't know, the customer base?
Well, one of the direct things is sitting right behind you. my head of fabrics, who came back from Italy and was quarantined for 2 weeks. She's now out and about and alive and well. But that is definitely one of the first things that happened for us. Like we, like everyone in the industry, had people in Europe because the fairs, the Fashion Week, everything is happening there. Actually, there was a big fabric fair happening in Italy at sort of the time that it all really started getting bad. So there's a lot of people that came back from Paris Fashion Week or from Italy, and then we had to take certain measures, and we are a small company, so all of those things have a big effect. Obviously, I'm not saying that bigger companies have it less, but like one person not being there, it was a big deal. So obviously, there's a lot of things that we don't know. And, we work with Italy a lot. We work a little bit with China. We work a lot, all around the world. So what we're seeing is that a lot of buyers were afraid to go to Paris. So we definitely missed appointments, and again, this is happening for everyone. This is not just for us at Sis Marjan. I think this is really, for the lack of a better word, it's a shit show. And we are hopefully, all going to recover from it, but we don't know. Really don't know.
Are you anticipating that this is going to be a rough year, and then next year is going to be back on track, or is there? I think that's what a lot of art industries are.
Yeah, I think it's the same because like when you think about sort of like being out of rotation, let's say for 3 weeks, that has a lasting effect. That means that you miss your deadlines, that you miss your this thing and that thing, and because fashion is so tight and every day is so important in the cycle because it's back to back. The aftermath of missing anything, or a factory not being able to send something, or a store not coming to your showroom to buy, it has effect on that day, 2 weeks later, 6 months later, a year later. So if things go better from now on, it'll be fine. But if things go bad, then we have to really calculate of this year being sort of a lost year. Yeah.
Any other questions in the audience over here?
Sander, if fashion is an art, how do we keep seeing like an Armani show at the Guggenheim or Alexander McQueen at the Met? Is it art adjacent, or can you sort of talk about the proliferation of those kind of shows?
Well, I think just because you put something in a museum doesn't make it art. I think it becomes, it becomes an appreciation from an art angle. The thing itself that is there is still a garment, is still fashion, in my opinion. McQueen is somebody who touched, this sphere of like between art and fashion, absolutely. He's probably one of the very few who I feel really, really, really had the brain of an artist and applied it to fashion. But again, like within my rules, which again are not the right ones, which is for me, they're made in the end to put on women and men and to make money off of it. So it's an applied art form in that sense.
I would also say that there is an economic rationale behind all of these shows, because not only do you get sponsorship, but they also draw routinely record blockbuster crowds. So the museums,
and not just to the museums, to the stores afterwards. Again, it's like an ecosystem. That would never happen if afterwards, the brand would not actually gain anything from it. You know what I mean? Like the prestige of being in a museum for a fashion house is good, but in the end, it is a business, and it is a win-win situation in that sense.
There was a lot of controversy when Takashi Murakami showed his LVMH bag collaborations in his show at, I think it was MoCA, and then it came to the Brooklyn Museum over here. And what's funny is that there was all this outrage over the commercialization of the museum in that case, but you could actually see a fashion exhibition as being a gigantic glorified gift store in a certain sense. Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Speaking of ecosystems, a lot of the work that you were showing just now in collaboration with Rem, who is a bit of a tree hugger, but not really, is nodding to this sort of landfill aspect of fashion, which is obviously one of the more kind of guilty industries for that. So it looks like you're flirting with trying to do good, but do you have any plans to maybe, reinvent?
Well, to start, the best thing to do is to not do it at all. If you really want to be sustainable, then I should just quit, because that's just the nature of the game of producing anything. So what I can do is, make sure that the footprint that we have as a company, as a business, from a local point of view, is as small as possible. By going through all the channels of the usual suspects of recycling, not using plastic, blah blah blah, and we do all of those things. Outside of that, I think this collection has taught us has really taught us a lot about different types of fabrications we can use. There are certain fabrics that you always use every season, and we found out that there are versions of it that are partly recycled or 100% recycled that do the same thing. So we start, implementing that. But there is a certain limitation. The reality is that there's a certain limitation as a fashion brand, and I don't think just as a fashion brand. I think as any provider of a product, there's a certain limitation of what you can really do.
Sorry, second part of that. Do you think the virus is going to change? Because the geolocal stuff and not travel, that might actually improve or somehow add to. There might be something positive that comes out of it in terms of maybe reinventing how we do business and
definitely
stuff.
Yeah, definitely within fashion. Because that's the only thing that I feel comfortable really talking about, because I can't talk about other industries. But I think within fashion, we're definitely rethinking the models. We're being forced to rethink the models, because if this were to continue, and for example, what I was talking about earlier, the buyers are not coming to Paris, but we are supposed to go, sell our clothes in Paris. Like, how do we do that? And maybe there is an effect that happens afterwards where we find a way to travel less or to have less footprint in a certain way. And I don't know if that will happen. That would be great if something positive were to happen from it. But I think we're all at the moment just trying to sort of take it day by day and figure out how to go about it. But it definitely forces us all to think about, how we live our day-to-day life and how we run businesses.
I mean, one thing that you're seeing in the art market is that it seems to be accelerating a lot of already existing trajectories. So there was a long push to bring the art market online. I mean, ArtNet is 30 years old, so we've been, fighting the good fight for 3 decades. But now the art fairs that have been kind of historically very averse to really stepping into the virtual or the digital are starting to unveil these virtual editions. So Art Basel Hong Kong, which canceled itself, this month, is going to instead have a virtual edition of that fair. So, I mean, there's a lot of innovation that's going on. Do you think that this is something that you're going to see in fashion? Are you going to have more?
Yeah, I mean, that's already what we did now for our showroom in Paris. We had to FaceTime with people, and the problem there is even more, I think, than with art. A garment is hard. A garment is being sold online. Like every day, every second. But there is something different about a buyer's relationship with the garments that they're seeing, because they're not just buying one piece, they're buying, the collection for their store. So it is quite hard for them to just over Skype kind of, see the fabric but not be able to feel it, and sort of see the look but not be able to put it on themselves. But again, like, maybe there's something that comes out of this that, gives us the opportunity to think of a new model where we don't all have to collectively travel, so much to do what we do.
Well, it's fascinating to think that there's a lot of incentive now to come up with some kind of technological solution to making a real kind of meaningful way of having a virtual engagement with an object, be it an artwork, be it a shirt, a jacket. And that's something that has always kind of been predicted to emerge somewhere down the line, but maybe now there's a little bit more, fire, under in the belly to do that. And any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming.